Hi, this is Vinita Bhatia. I'm the editor of Campaign India, and I'm here at the Cannes Lions International Festival of Creativity. And if there's one thing that's on everybody's mind, it's sports. Everyone over here wants to talk about sports, be a part of sports, and learn more about sports. And I have someone who can give a deeper understanding about it. It's Monica Conway. She's the acting global CEO and the COO of Fuse. So, Monica, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to Campaign. And this is your first time in Cannes, right?
This is my first time in Cannes, and yes, it's sensory overload, and the heat is unreal. So it's nice to be in this very cool room with you today.
I can imagine. And at the same time, you're coming in at a very interesting time when A, the big merger took place, B, we are talking about sports, and that's literally on everybody's minds, right? So what are some of the conversations that we've had since morning?
It's definitely trending. I think just touching on the merger, obviously, we've got an embarrassment of riches of sports agencies now in this combine, and we're all getting to know each other and collaborating, which is great. And today, actually, Omnicom in the Cove, they kind of they basically launched their story around sport today. So it's definitely on everybody's mind. It's the big topic of conversation at the moment. I think just the proliferation of agencies showcasing sport at Cannes as well. I know the Sport Beach is a big thing now. It's grown. The amount of sports talent and celebrities that are here as well, hosting talks and seminars. It's incredible. And I do think that it's a place that brands now, they can see the value in it because it's, there's not many live experiences left because everything's so digital and people are living online lives. But I think it's the one place that is unpredictable. It's where people's passions will collide. It's culturally relevant. People like to talk about it beyond the actual game as well, and they can do that through their social channels, through watching YouTube. So it does feel that it's not particularly the new world of sport. It feels like it's the world at the moment. So it's so interesting to be in our in this industry at the moment in time.
And it's also very interesting because Fuse has been part of Omnicom since 2008, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
And after 2 decades of almost helping brands to connect with the youth culture, now you're literally seeing youth reclaim what fandom will stand up for and what fandom will mean. So looking back, is there any particular sponsorship? It's like asking to pick your favorite child. I know that.
Yes, it is.
But is there any campaign that really shaped the way youth culture could be defined?
It's a good question because I think youth culture, the term has only really come about in the last few years, whereas we've had loads of campaigns historically that have been trying to reach that audience, like grassroots campaigns like PepsiCo, Lay's did Lay's Replay, where they recycle their packets to create pitches and football communities in socio-economically deprived countries. They have 12 of those now. But that was kind of an early example of a campaign to reach that audience and actually build community as well, which was very successful. And it's 12 pitches later and they still have that on their agenda. So it's got the sustainability angle, it's got the community angle, it's got the youth angle, and also female participation. So they're a big, they sponsor the Champions League, the Women's Champions League, as well as the men's. So I'd say that for me is a campaign that still has longevity. But a more recent campaign, which was done by Fuse in Germany, actually, is the Philips One Blade integration into Fortnite. So it was the Body Royal campaign. So Gen Z, I think it's true to say that, the stats show that about 87% of Gen Z game, and they do it for many hours, and they actually dwell quite a lot in the games, as well as watching other people play games. And they're not watching traditional linear TV anymore. They'll watch it on demand whenever they want to. So being immersed in the gaming community, but you need to be authentic as well. So they built into Fortnite this Body Royale component of it, which was basically incorporating the blade and a map of a body, and basically the game was to shave as much hair as possible, right?
Ooh.
So it built a community though that was engaging around something which traditionally the advertising would have been in a bathroom showing probably a much older, guy shaving. That would be your traditional kind of way to advertise that. But this actually really engaged that community, and they also incorporated the ability through Amazon to buy the product direct.
So it was in-game shopping that was enabled?
So that was enabled, which I thought was super smart. And obviously there was incentives in there, and outside of that, the creator community developed, who were also then doing their own sort of influencer marketing, and that was going viral, being shared on their socials. So that was a super successful campaign. And they also played at one of the big sort of gaming leagues as well, and it got fandom around a shaving product.
That's really interesting.
I thought that was a super smart campaign, which they ran in EMEA, and I know they're looking at other markets outside of EMEA to do the same. So I thought that was a lovely way to integrate their products into a rights holder.
Now that you mention about it, there was an interesting insight I learned about recently, that the global amount that, the payout that is there in the Esports championship is much higher than that of Wimbledon. And it came as a massive surprise to me. I think in Esports, it's closer to $75 million.
Yes.
And Wimbledon, which one would have thought is higher, is something in the range of 70 or so. And that by itself speaks a lot about the kind of popularity of gaming.
It does. And the audience, I think, because, Wimbledon, I think, again, it's only like on for a short period of time. I know there are other tennis tournaments around it, but Wimbledon itself is only on for sort of 4 weeks. So it's about the brand being able to be always on, not just for that particular time of the actual, when the actual game's played. But I think with esports, because it's been, because the Gen Zs are playing it all year round, and then they get to the actual competition, it's heightened. But the ability for the brand to be always on 12 months of the year, rather than just 4 weeks, which is probably why it attracts
that's quite possible.
So
but at the same
investment,
time,
maybe.
if you look at it, Wimbledon is also anchored with a lot of celebrities who also become brand champions and also become great assets for brands to take the messaging to the market. But gaming kind of lacks it. Of course, there will be certain streamers, who are strong, who have their own cult, but they might not. I don't know if any of them, other than Mr. Beast, might have the kind of following that Roger Federer has. So do you think that there is a potential that at some point in time gaming can become, if not at par, but create that kind of cult personalities that will become who become great assets for brands to actually invest in?
I'm sure it will happen. I think probably it's those future sort of brand ambassadors are gaming right now. And if they can see a career for themselves, I think you'll get those personalities, as we were discussing earlier, that not everybody will be successful at doing this, but you will get those people with very strong personalities and very strong sort of whatever their own personal brands are that will come through, that will attract more followers into it. And as the game developers, and actually a lot of the gamers also co-create games as well with the owners of it, because they know what they like in a game and they can, be part of that innovation process. So I think it is very possible. And I just think, a lot of people do spend more of that age, do spend more time online. And I'm not saying that that's a really long-term healthy thing, but I think if they get enjoyment out of that and that gives them some sort of respite from just, the day-to-day, then why not? But I do think it's still early days in its professionalization, I should imagine. But it's really big and it's attracting more viewership, if you like. And I know there's a big esports competition that they hold in Riyadh as well that's getting bigger and bigger, more traction. So let's see. But I'd like to think, yes, it would.
Okay, so I'll also segue back to one of the earlier points that you mentioned, which was about the campaign that really caught your attention, and the one which is the Pepsi one.
The Pepsi
right?
one, yeah.
So Pepsi is doing a great activation this
Yes.
year as well, because they're the I think it's the food and beverage partner for F1, if I'm not mistaken.
They are, yes.
And a couple of years ago, F1 actually launched an academy to train women drivers, a first of its
Yes.
first movement
Yeah.
of its sort. Now, women's sports is something that has picked up, across geographies. Yet, it still doesn't get the kind of love and attention that predominantly male sports gets. So, how
Yes.
is Fuse working with its clientele, telling them that this is a great opportunity, get in early,
Yes.
and establish yourself?
Yeah, no, great question. I think women's sports is still very underinvested in, and there's still more potential for it. And I think actually, in terms of return on your investment, it's really good value. I think the sport that's probably had the best kind of acceleration in its investment and professionalisation is obviously women's football. And we've worked with, one of our clients is Google, and they created an FC Creator Academy, which basically had female fans creating content around female football, which really helps to kind of raise the game, if you like, and create storylines around it. So they're a great investor in women's football, as are PepsiCo, who are one of the first sponsors of the Women's Champions League. And they, when we look at their approach to activation across both the men's and the women's, they make sure that they invest the same amount of money across both to make sure that it both gets the right amount of attention that it deserves. So they've been great in that. I think, we've seen the rise of the England team as well, the Lionesses doing so well. And it has definitely raised audience numbers in it. And each of those individual players have their own followers now, their influencers as their side hustle. So I just think it's getting much better for football. I think other sports are following suit, but in probably slower steps. So Vodafone is another client of ours that sponsors the women's rugby. They helped create an app to basically measure their cycle and their performance, which was, again, a bit of a first for the women's game. And that was a great way to showcase how their technology could help improve individuals in terms of, winning and performing on the pitch. So there are definitely lots of pockets of investment, but I think definitely more could be done. And again, it's probably an undervalued way in compared to a lot of the men's games at the moment. It'd be interesting to see actually with that what the forecast revenues will be for the Women's World Cup in Brazil next year, given the huge amounts of numbers being forecast by FIFA for the men's. It'd be interesting to see how much the women's will grow from the previous tournament. I should imagine it will be, the percentage exponentially will be pretty good compared to when it was held in it's Australia, wasn't it? It was held the last one, because of the interest now in football in general, but also in the women's game. I think also, it's being held in Brazil. There are huge football fans in Brazil, and I think there'll be far more women participation in terms of watching the World Cup as well.
In fact, there are some studies which have shown that the women participation and the, whether it's active participation or passive participation in sports has seen a lot faster acceleration as compared to the male participation, because
Yes.
male participation has always been there, but it seems to be plateauing. It could be for various reasons, but women are becoming a lot more active, and
Yes.
hence brands and again, unfortunately, the brands that usually look at backing these are FMCG brands, beauty and wellness brands,
Yeah.
but there seems to be an opportunity for the other ones, like whether it's a BFSI companies, whether it's various other.
I think definitely. I think finance. I think if you look at I know the population in the UK, for example, in terms of the number of single women now, like at age 30, is growing, and which means they've got the income power, and actually in a lot of couples now, the women actually earn more than the men. I think their spending power is enormous, and they want brands they can trust to guide them in things like financial investment and pensions. So I do think that we'll see probably an entrance of the brands that particularly you associate with the men's game, which will come into the women's game as well, because of this change in the demographic of women. I mean, I'm sure that's also probably prevalent in certain areas across the globe, not just in the UK, in terms of the buying power that they now have and independence.
Let's look at that. In fact, you alluded to FIFA, so I'm going to ask you about that and ask some numbers. So WOG forecasts that there's going to be a $10.5 billion ad spend uplift around FIFA World Cup in 2026. Yet, sponsor recall doesn't always rise in line with the investment. In that context, according to you, what do brands value most when they invest in a high-value property, sporting property like FIFA, in terms of sponsorship today? And how exactly has that value proposition evolved over the years?
Yeah, I mean, good question. I think when you buy into FIFA, you're not just buying into the logo and the use of their IP. I think they've got a whole ecosystem of rights that they now offer to brands, which is why I think they do command much bigger prices for their properties. And because it's not just the World Cup, they've got all the other cups as well that go on, the women's, the men's. They're always creating new leagues, a bit like the IPL. They're making sure that there's something that's not just every 4 years now. There's something that you can watch and participate in. And the youth clubs as well, the leagues that they create there. So I feel that they have got not just the IP, the licensing, they've also got the creator community, they've got the athletes, they've got the ability to co-create with brands as well, beyond just the game. So I do think that the valuation now of FIFA is more than just the actual tournament that's happening right now, the 104 games. But I think it's more than that. It's about their reach in terms of football fandom and the communities that they can behold. So, but for some brands, it's not affordable. Like the entry levels are not affordable. So it's about whether they can activate around that. There's ways that they can do it. They can basically sponsor watch parties and be part of the community without obviously using FIFA licensing. Otherwise they get into big trouble if they did. So I think there are ways that you can definitely activate around the game and the passion of football and the sport. And I've spent some time in America recently, and just being in Miami, every single restaurant, bar owner has got footballs hanging. They've got some sort of everything. Everybody's got a screen, and I do feel that there is that kind of spillover effect from a big global event like the World Cup. And obviously, I think the number I saw is that something like half the global population will be tuning in to at least a game over the course of the tournament. So it's got far reach, very far, reach for that particular property.
So while we're talking about football, okay, and you did mention about the fact that these properties can be expensive, and not all brands might find them amenable to the marketing budgets that are there, and at the same time they need to think beyond just slapping on their logo on the jersey or whichever the real estate that is there. So do you think that with this rising cost that is there, some brands are rethinking major sponsorships? And is this some kind of a cyclical adjustment that is there? Closer home, for example, in India, we saw that with the IPL, a lot of the tech brands were the ones which are up front and center, which, well, it came as a surprise, but they were there. And at the same time, a year ago, some of the online gaming brands that were there, they had to drop off for governmental reasons. Now, how exactly will this kind of change impact the investment in emerging sports as well as the existing ones?
Yes. Now, look, some brands have been outpriced from some of these properties, and in the world economy at the moment, you're going to have some particular brands that are doing better than others in their ecosystem. But I know that where some brands have been pushed out of a particular property, they're rethinking their strategy and looking at what other properties they can go into, and maybe even just doing a complete pivot. So if you've been in sport, why don't you look at music or entertainment or other passion-led activities. So they can pivot. The other way they can pivot is into these newer sports. So we mentioned Kabaddi earlier, and obviously one of our clients, Share Finance, basically very strategically chose not to sponsor cricket, which is like the number one sport in India, but actually to sponsor Kabaddi because it suited their target audience outside of those big metro cities, looking at tier 1, tier 2. And that's where Kabaddi actually really is played and watched. So there's a lot of viewership for that particular sport. And that's where they built their campaign around trust, and it was very successful, and they're going to continue with that sponsorship, I believe, again. So I feel that padel could be another sport as well, which is growing in popularity. I know that in the UK, many tennis courts are now being converted into padel courts because it's far more accessible, it's cheaper for people to actually play, and it's very family orientated. So like the family can go and play. It's very easy to learn rather than getting sort of coaching that you might, and lessons you might need to get for tennis. So I think actually seeing padel and the proliferation of padel, I don't know if
it is pretty popular. It's picking up popularity
India
in India
as well. But again, there's the rights holders, there's quite a few leagues now that are professionalising the sport and actually getting savvier about getting brands in. And again, those brands have got to authentically play in that sport and provide a benefit or service to it. But I do think that's a much cheaper entry level. It will get more expensive as it grows in popularity. But this is where brands can help grow the sport actually, which is great. So in terms of they could look at how they could train more coaches in padel or just provide more courts. I think Renault did a really good campaign in France where they built many padel courts in, again, economic areas where people, children and people could participate at a very low cost. And that was a really nice campaign as well that they did. So I do think that those emerging sports definitely. It's interesting actually, I was contacted by the CEO of Parkour, and she was looking for some help to try and, create packages for brands so it'd be easy to buy. And at the first, to begin with, I was like, who does parkour? And then there's a huge community.
John Conway.
Huge community on YouTube, and I was watching it. It makes me feel a bit nervous to watch it jumping off a tall building, but it's obviously a growing participatory sport, and again, very popular with Gen Z. So I do think that the landscape of sport is changing.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that also brings me to the point that even the way brands are approaching it is also changing. For example, brands like, top of the mind, Heineken, right? They are building the communities that you're talking about. Fan first,
yes.
Where they're leaning into the culture. They're not just looking at brand sponsorship. At the same time, they're taking music. They're taking, we spoke about Pepsi also. It took the sound of Sting for its campaign. And they're not looking only at rights ownership. But do you see that there will be an equilibrium that will come, where it evolves between sponsorship and community building? Because you need to have that balancing act very clearly defined. You can't let the scales tip in one way or the other.
I think it's also quite risky to just invest in one particular approach. I do think the beauty will be where it's kind of equally delivering in terms of the outcomes and the return on the investment. And I do think the successful rights holders will embrace that fandom community and will work together to help build it for brands if it doesn't exist already. But I do think vice versa as well, is that where brands are building their own sort of awareness and authenticity in just like the fandom community, that they will need a rights holder at some point and a property to basically hang their hat on as well. In terms of just like more asset creation, global assets as well. It's difficult for a fandom community to create global assets for you. You will need a rights holder to be able to do that. So I do think there's a nice harmony between the two. How you do the mix between them in terms of investment, I think that's where you'll need to have a really good measurement framework to be able to support the investment and then measure it afterwards as well. So I do think that probably where the the measurement of fandom is kind of nascent at the moment. That will develop more because brands will need both. We'll be able to need, like, for every dollar invested, what's the return on that dollar in that particular property or in that particular community. So that's going to be interesting to see how that goes.
So while we spoke about the sports market by broadly, let's dial a little deeper into what Fuse is doing. And
okay.
Because we haven't even touched that. And
No.
as sponsorship objectives become more and more sophisticated, like we just mentioned about the fact that how they need to be a little bit more mindful about how every dollar gives them the right kind of returns. Are there certain metrics or signals that Fuse finds very useful when it comes to assessing what is the success of a particular maybe brand activation or the kind of sponsorship opportunities for its clients, or even the rights?
Yeah, look, I think it's messy, right? It's not straightforward at trying to measure sponsorship because of the different touch points that it has. You've obviously got the visual recognition of the logo, the brand awareness, but then there's all the other touch points as well. In terms of brand affinity, does that influence consumer behaviour to actually purchase? It's very difficult to join the dots there. So what we do at Fuse is we have lots of sources of data and ways to measure it, and we put it into a framework. I think the non-paid media side of things, we need to categorise and find a way to standardise measuring it, and then put it into the paid media format. This, which is a term now that everybody talks about, this like mixed marketing modelling, the MMM model. So it's the harmonisation of getting the non-paid data and the MMN model together, and actually making sure that you've got a good framework that will be not particularly standardised, and it won't be standardised for every single sponsorship because FIFA is going to be different to Wimbledon, is going to be different to the gaming industry. But it's about creating that framework for a particular property and a particular brand, depending on their brand objectives. So we're very good at building those bespoke models, but actually using the tech and tools with Omnicom, because they have a huge, vast data set in Omni, and actually they have a lot, it's powered by these agentic AI. Mm-hmm. So actually it will make things speedier and more real time to be able to assess what was the impact of that particular game that happened or that particular league or tournament. It'll be easier to actually do that quicker in terms of assessing it. And also what I'm seeing now, because we're part of Omnicom Media Group, and everything's changing at a pace in terms of the data tools, AI obviously driving all of that, is that brands now are expecting us to be able to throw in the sponsorship numbers into their media numbers and be able to basically curate a media plan based on the results in real time, and actually pulling the levers to change the channel investment. Mm-hmm. Again, very much driven by agentic AI. So that is already happening for some of our brands at Omnicom, and it's really interesting about in terms of the power of data. And I know that Omnicom have launched today the Fan Graph. Mm-hmm. So that's powered by Axiom Real ID. So Axiom, they purchased as part of the merger with IPG. And the stats are at the top of my head here. So I think they have 2.6 billion global consumer IDs and 260 million consumer IDs just for the US alone. So at the moment, it's very much a US-based product, but they are looking to roll it out market by market, depending on the Axiom data available in market. Now, this will identify a fan mm-hmm. and its behaviours, not just a consumer. We know what it's a fan of. We know its passions, and I say it. Say item A. Item A. We know their passions, their sports. We know how they consume their passion and when they consume it, and we'll know their behaviours and their propensity to buy as well. And you can see that this will lead to very much personalised advertising going down the line in terms of content and content, and even personalised content at a particular time and moment in a game. And that content could be different throughout the course of that match, depending on the emotion of what's happening in the match. So if your team's losing or winning, the content can be curated and changed, knowing how you emotionally connect with the game. I'm like, wow. It's just, it blows my mind, but it's very possible because of this.
But at the same time, I was just thinking, at the top of my mind, so you have this data courtesy Axiom, right?
Yeah.
Brand marketers also sitting on a whole treasure trove of data.
Yes.
And that means you have to map that data that they have of their audience or potential audience, existing audience, and then lay it over or layer it with the kind of data that you have. And suddenly there is going to be so much data and so much that you have to do. And at the same time, then you still have to come up with the personalization, and you have to do it at speed. You have to do it at scale. You have to do it with efficiency, and you have to do it at a very reasonable cost.
Yes, you do.
I do not envy your job, but I just want to know how you do it.
Well, look, I think it was Cindy from WPP was talking about it today, about how the old agency model is broken. I'd say it was broken years ago. I think totally that model is not fit for purpose, but hasn't been for a number of years. So what we do at Fuse is we look at outcomes rather than inputs and the cost of inputs. So if we're aligned, if Fuse's objectives are aligned with clients' objectives and brands' objectives for success in terms of achieving those objectives, then actually they should pay for outcomes and not the inputs. It has only been possible because of the advent of data, I think, and the ability to actually prove an outcome. Being able to link those brand activations to sales, like as I mentioned, Philips OneBlade, the fact that they built in the commerce ability to convert and measure those sales that's technology for you, enabling that. So I think you're right, with first-party data from brands, second-party data that you'd get through like Axiom, third-party data being brought in, then you can form these, and I know it's very privacy compliant, you can form these IDs of individuals, and you can predict their behaviours, even using AI, you can predict their behaviours and how they're going to react to a particular piece of personalised content in terms of their consumer habits and their propensity to buy, and even how regular they buy. And I know that in Amazon, we've got the Flywheel product that Omnicom own. It does exactly that, and it can do it together with Amazon's logistical data in terms of the fulfillment of it. So they won't deliver an ad unless they can fulfill it, I think, in 10 working days. That's kind of Amazon's USP. So they won't serve you a content if they know that you will buy it there and then because it's not in stock. So all of that, just this data from all the different touch points, the funnel's collapsed, I think, or is collapsing. The funnel is collapsing. I want to say it's the new world, because it feels to me, my generation, it feels, unbelievably new and exciting. And I think brands should be excited about the ability to be able to do more targeted advertising and actually show the return on their investments as well. So
it's definitely different times. Exciting.
Yes.
It also requires a lot of courage, and it also requires a lot of deliberation. And I'm sure, Omnicom already has plans on how it's going to be able to do it. And you definitely seem to know exactly how you want to drive it at Fuse. So firstly, I want to say thank you so much, Monica. And then I'm going to make a little pun over here. Thank you so much for being such a sport.
Oh, thank you, Vinita. Thank you so much. I feel like you're a great coach. So thank you for today. I really enjoyed the interview and being in Cannes.